We'll get to the political left's reaction to this, particularly Ilhan Omar, because it's very telling. Okay, so Bernie Sanders, you just saw Waleed Shahid blame President Trump for what happened in Poway. Here is Bernie Sanders' tweet about the synagogue shooting. He says, another horrific shooting at a place of worship today at the Poway Synagogue in San Diego County. We must work every day to eradicate all forms of hatred and bigotry and take serious action to protect Americans from gun violence. Now, quick note. The original critique of President Trump's take on Charlottesville is that he did not condemn white supremacy by name. Where is the condemnation of anti-Semitism by name? Where? This reminds me very much of after the attacks on Christians in Sri Lanka, when Democrats simply refused to say that it was a radical Islamic attack on Christians, which it was. Democrats simply chalked it up to generalized hate. And Democrats have been doing this with anti-Semitism and anti-Christian sentiment for quite a while now. Every time there is something bad that happens to a Jew, the first reaction is, well, let's condemn all forms of hate. This is how they shied away from condemning Ilhan Omar, who's an open anti-Semite. Instead, they just said, we hate all forms of hate are bad. White supremacy, particularly bad. How about this? White supremacy is evil. People who propagate white supremacy are evil. Left-wing anti-Semitism is evil. People who propagate it are evil. Islamic anti-Semitism is evil. People who propagate it are evil. Why is it hard to say any of these things? And you see this even from Peter Beinart, who's honestly as close to a Hamas spokesperson as anybody on the left. I mean, every time Israel gets in a war with Hamas, it's always Israel's fault. Beinart's just awful in every way. So he tweets this out. He tweets, if you foment hatred against Muslims, don't offer your sympathy when hatred kills Jews. Okay, so let's parse that for just a second. If you foment hatred against Muslims, don't offer your sympathy when hatred kills Jews. Muslims and Jews are two separate groups. And just because the same people sometimes are interested in killing both Muslims and Jews, that does not make the groups exactly the same. Now, you shouldn't foment hatred against Muslims. But the innate swing from Peter Beinart away from anti-Semitism and toward we must protect Ilhan Omar is amazing, because that's what's happening there, right? What Peter Beinart is doing there, his tweet is obviously a way to protect Ilhan Omar. So if you say Ilhan Omar is an anti-Semite, Peter Beinart says, aha, you're attacking Ilhan Omar. That means you don't care about dead Jews. How sick is that logic? How sick is that logic? And if you condemn what happened in Christchurch, then presumably that's not enough. If you say that radical Islam is evil and that normal Islam might be fine, or that you know many Muslims who are good, or that Islam isn't inherently tied to violence, but there are too many Muslims who are violent, Peter Beinart will condemn you for the killing of Jews in Poway. He says anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are two symptoms of the same white nationalist disease. You either fight them both or you are complicit in them both. Well, how about you fight white supremacy overall, but also you're allowed to criticize. I mean, it's so funny. The same people who will say that if you talk about anti-Semitism, you are trying to silence talk about Israel. The same people will say, well, if you criticize radical Islam at all, really you're in favor of white supremacy. What a joke Peter Beinart is, just intellectually corrupt beyond all measure. So Ilhan Omar then sounds off herself. She says, my heart is breaking after today's deadly shooting at Chabad congregation in San Diego. On the last day of Passover and 6 months to the day after the Tree of Life shooting, we as a nation must confront the terrifying rise of religious hate and violence. Love trumps hate. So that last line there, obviously a reference to President Trump and a suggestion that, because that was a slogan that was being used against Trump in 2016. Now, listen, do I think that Ilhan Omar is happy when Jews get shot at a Chabad? No, I don't. But Ilhan Omar certainly does not take anti-Semitism seriously. She clearly does not. I mean, she is an anti-Semite. She does not take anti-Semitism seriously. And then hilariously enough, Ted Cruz tweets out, the anti-Semitic left, he's condemning the New York Times cartoon. He says, the anti-Semitic left, whether Ilhan Omar's repeated anti-Israel slurs or the New York Times apologizing for Hamas terrorists and running racist cartoons is getting worse. And the House can't even pass an anti-Semitism resolution. Responsible Dems need to say enough is enough. Ilhan Omar tweets back to that, a white nationalist literally terrorized a synagogue during Passover yesterday, and you have yet to say anything. Shame on you. Yes, I'm sure that Ilhan Omar is the leading tip of the spear in fighting anti-Semitism and white nationalism when it targets Jews. I'll fight white nationalists over any of this crap. I don't think that Ilhan Omar is leading the fight against anti-Semitism in the United States, and that suggestion is a joke. It's a joke. I'll just point out here one final thing about Ilhan Omar. So over the weekend, she accused President Trump of incitement again. Incitement again. Why? Because President Trump pointed out that Ralph Northam had said in an open interview that there are situations in which a baby is born and then doctors and the mother can decide whether it should die or not. And Ilhan Omar said, this is truly dangerous and sickening. Is this deranged president suggesting parents and doctors are working together to commit infanticide? We have seen religious fanatics bombing clinics and threatening women. This will fan the flames of violence. Stop the misinformation. So in other words, according to Ilhan Omar, it's incitement if you criticize her. It's incitement if President Trump points out what Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia, said. But Ilhan Omar is never guilty of incitement, no matter how much anti-Semitic bile she spews. As I said before, if you are blind to anti-Semitism from one particular side of the aisle because it favors your political position, you are not in the fight against anti-Semitism. You're part of the problem.